Imagine for a moment that you're facing one of the most challenging times in your life. Perhaps you're overwhelmed, anxious, or lost in the noise of the world around you. You try everything, distractions, new habits, maybe even some well-meaning advice from friends. Yet, nothing seems to give you the peace or clarity you're searching for. But what if I told you that the answer to your deepest struggles might not lie in doing more, but in doing less? What if silence? Yes, the kind of silence that feels uncomfortable at first could be the key to everything you've been looking for. In today's video, we're going to explore something profound: the incredible power of silence and how it can bring us closer to the peace and purpose we crave. Inspired by the wisdom of Gautama Buddha and a timeless story, we'll uncover how words, and the absence of them, can either help us find clarity or pull us further away from our true selves. We're going to dive into a story of a prince who embarked on a journey of silence, and in doing so, uncovered deep truths about himself, the world, and the purpose that had always been within him. This journey might just be the one you need to take to hear your own inner voice. But before we dive in, make sure to like this video if you're ready to embark on this transformative journey with us. Subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, so you never miss a story like this, and comment below. What do you think is the hardest part of silence for you? Is it the quiet, the stillness, or maybe something else? Let's get started. In the midst of all the distractions we face daily, it can be hard to find moments of true peace. We live in a world where everything is constantly demanding our attention: our phones, the news, social media, work, family. The noise is relentless, and often it feels impossible to escape. But what if I told you that the real peace you seek might lie not in the noise, but in the quiet? This is where the teachings of Gautama Buddha come in. Buddha once said, "Words have power. They can either heal or harm." It's a simple statement, but its implications are profound. In today's world, words are everywhere. We speak them, we hear them, we think them. But how often do we really listen to the words we speak, or the words we choose not to speak? Let me take you on a journey, a story that might resonate deeply with what you are experiencing right now. Picture a young prince living in a kingdom where everything was set up for his success. He had wealth, he had power, and yet he was not at peace. The constant demands of his royal duties, the expectations of his people, and the endless noise of court life made it impossible for him to find any sense of inner calm. One day, the prince meets an old monk, a man whose face seems to hold the wisdom of the ages. The monk tells the prince that if he is ever to find true peace, he must leave behind everything he knows and embark on a journey, one that will take him to the depths of silence. 15 days of total silence, the monk declares. At first, the prince is taken aback. 15 days? How could he survive without speaking? His mind races with questions. What would happen to his kingdom? How would he communicate with his people? The idea of silence seems impossible, even dangerous. Yet, something in the monk's words stirs something deep within him. Perhaps, just perhaps, this could be the answer he's been seeking. With great hesitation, the prince agrees. He sets off with the monk, and as the days pass, he begins to feel a strange restlessness creeping into his soul. Silence is more challenging than he could have ever imagined. Without the constant chatter of his royal life, he is forced to confront the noise that lives within his own mind, the worries, the anxieties, the unspoken fears. For the first few days, the prince is unsettled. His thoughts race. He can't shake the feeling that something is missing. At night, he finds it difficult to sleep, his mind still racing with the concerns of his kingdom, his people, and his own uncertain future. In these moments, the prince begins to feel something that many of us can relate to: the fear of being alone with our own thoughts. But here's the first truth he learns. Silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's the absence of distractions. When we remove the constant noise from our lives, we are forced to confront what we've been running from, the chaos within. It's in this chaos, this internal storm, that transformation begins. Think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever tried to sit in silence, only to find that your mind starts spinning with worries or self-doubt? It's uncomfortable, isn't it? It's almost as if the mind has a mind of its own, constantly churning and filling every moment with thoughts and concerns. Yet, this restlessness is not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that you are on the verge of something deeper, something more profound. The prince, much like you or I, begins to see that the noise outside is just a reflection of the noise within. The more he tries to escape it, the louder it gets. But as the days pass, something subtle begins to shift. By the 5th day, the prince starts noticing the beauty of his surroundings in a way he never did before. He sees the delicate colors of the sunrise, hears the rustling of the trees in the wind, feels the texture of the earth beneath his feet. Without the constant distraction of words, his senses begin to open in ways that were previously clouded. It's as if the world around him and within him begins to come into sharper focus. And then on the 7th day, something extraordinary happens. The prince begins to notice the stillness within himself. He finds that in the absence of external noise, he can hear his own thoughts more clearly. But even more powerfully, he begins to hear a voice deep within him, a voice that had always been there, but had been drowned out by the clamor of his life. This is where the true journey begins. In the silence, the prince begins to hear not only the world around him, but also the voice of his own soul. This is the same voice that many of us silence with the noise of our daily lives, the voice that holds the answers to our deepest questions, the one that knows our true purpose. It's important to remember that the silence the prince is experiencing isn't just about shutting out the external world. It's about tuning into a deeper level of awareness where the noise of the mind no longer drowns out the wisdom of the heart. This is a level of peace that many of us are desperately seeking, and yet it often eludes us because we're so caught up in the external world. As the days go by, the prince becomes more and more attuned to this inner peace. By the 12th day, he has entered a state of deep meditation. It's as if he has transcended the surface level of his mind and entered into the realm of pure being, a place where the noise no longer holds power and the heart speaks with clarity. And this is when he realizes something life-changing. True peace, true rest, is not something that comes from the outside. It is not something that can be found in the external world. True peace comes from within. It comes from learning to silence the mind, to step away from the constant barrage of words and thoughts, and to reconnect with the deepest part of ourselves. This is the lesson that the prince learns, and it's a lesson that we can all apply to our own lives. How often do we speak without thinking? How often do we get caught up in the noise of the world and forget to listen to the voice inside us? Words, when used mindlessly, can create chaos. But words, when used thoughtfully and with purpose, can heal, transform, and bring us closer to the truth of who we are. So, let me ask you, have you ever considered what would happen if you were to step away from the noise for just a moment? What would it feel like to take 20 minutes a day to sit in silence, to listen not just to the world around you, but to the world within you? This could be the first step in finding the clarity and peace you've been searching for. And as we continue this journey, I invite you to reflect on this question. What are you truly seeking in the silence? What might you discover if you allow yourself the space to listen? I'll pause here for a moment so you can reflect on that. Let it sit with you, and when we come back, we'll delve deeper into how the prince's journey in silence led him to uncover his true purpose. So, stay with me. As the days of silence continue, the prince begins to experience a shift within himself. His initial restlessness slowly fades away, replaced by a growing sense of calm. It's not the kind of calm that comes from solving problems or getting everything under control. It's a deeper, more profound stillness, a peace that simply is, regardless of what's happening around him. By the time he reaches the 13th day of his silence, the prince starts to understand something crucial. The noise he once thought of as outside forces, his duties, his responsibilities, his worries, are in fact reflections of his inner state. The more chaotic his mind was, the more chaotic his world seemed. The external noise was nothing more than a mirror of the mental noise he carried inside. This realization is both liberating and humbling. The prince now sees that he has the power to change his inner landscape, and in doing so, change the way he experiences the world. It's not the world that needs to change, but his perception of it. Have you ever felt like the world is just too much? Like it's all happening at once, and you can't keep up? I'm sure many of us can relate to that feeling. But just as the prince learns, it's not about making the world less noisy. It's about shifting the way we engage with it. By finding inner silence, we gain the ability to respond to life's challenges with clarity and purpose, rather than reacting in haste or fear. The prince's growing awareness of his own mind leads him to a powerful insight. The greatest barrier to peace isn't the world around us, but the restless chatter of our own thoughts. For so long, he had been caught up in the belief that his problems were external. He had assumed that if only the kingdom was quieter, if only his duties were fewer, if only his people were more understanding, he could find peace. But now, in the silence, he begins to see that peace is not something to be found outside. It's something that must be cultivated within. Let's take a moment to reflect on this. Think about your own life. How often do you look for peace in the wrong places? How often do you tell yourself that if only your circumstances were different, if only you had more time, or if only the people around you understood you better, then you would be at peace? But here's the truth. The external world will never give you lasting peace. It might offer temporary relief, but peace that depends on circumstances is fragile. The real peace, the one that lasts, is the kind that comes from within. It's the peace that arises when we let go of our attachment to the noise and begin to tune in to something deeper, something eternal. Now, as the prince moves into the final days of his journey, the transformation becomes even more profound. By the 15th day, something extraordinary happens. The prince finds himself entering a deep state of meditation. It's as if all his thoughts, worries, and distractions have fallen away, leaving only pure presence. In this state, he experiences a moment of absolute stillness, a peace so deep that it feels like the very essence of existence. In this moment of perfect silence, the prince gains the ultimate realization. True suffering does not come from external circumstances, but from within. It is not the world that causes us to suffer. It is our attachment to thoughts, words, and beliefs that keep us trapped in cycles of anxiety and fear. When we let go of the constant need to control, to speak, to explain, we are freed. This is where true wisdom is found. The prince, having gone through the struggle of silence, now understands that silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is a sacred space, a space where we can confront our fears, our doubts, and our anxieties. It is in this space that we connect with our deepest truth, the part of ourselves that is beyond words, beyond thoughts, beyond the distractions of the world. You might be wondering, how can this apply to me? How can this idea of silence, of disconnecting from the noise, help me in my own life? The answer is simpler than you think. In our everyday lives, we are constantly bombarded with messages, opinions, and expectations. We speak too much, listen too little, and rarely take the time to sit with ourselves. But if we begin to carve out moments of stillness, whether it's through meditation, a walk in nature, or simply sitting in silence, we begin to create space for something profound to happen. In silence, we hear the whispers of our soul. We begin to understand our own hearts, our true desires, and the wisdom that lies within us. It is in silence that we can discern the words we need to speak, and more importantly, the words we need to avoid. Think about the way we use words in our lives. How often do we speak out of habit, out of fear, or simply to fill the silence? But words, when spoken without mindfulness, can lead to misunderstandings, conflict, and even harm. The prince's journey teaches us that true power lies not in speaking more, but in speaking wisely. Knowing when to speak, and more importantly, knowing when to remain silent, can have a profound impact on the course of our lives. This is where the real transformation happens. The prince, having experienced the deep peace of silence, now understands the power of words. He knows that words are not just sounds, they are energy, vibration, and intention. Every word we speak carries weight. It can heal, inspire, or it can hurt. The prince now speaks with purpose, knowing that his words have the power to uplift or to destroy. This is the essence of true power, knowing when to speak and when to be silent. In a world that values constant communication, we often forget that silence itself holds immense strength. The quiet moments, the pauses between words, are where we can tap into our deepest wisdom. And when we speak from that place, our words resonate with truth and purpose. As the prince emerges from his 15 days of silence, he is not the same person he was when he began. He has discovered an inner strength and clarity that he never knew was possible. And in doing so, he has unlocked the key to true peace. As the prince completes his 15 days of silence, he returns to his kingdom, a changed man. He no longer seeks peace in the same ways he did before. Gone is the frantic urgency to control every detail, to fill every moment with noise, and to keep up with the demands of his position. Instead, he now carries with him a sense of deep inner stillness, a quiet confidence that radiates from within. The kingdom, of course, hasn't changed. The people still need his guidance, his leadership, his responsibilities remain, and yet the prince approaches them with a newfound grace and wisdom. It's not that the challenges have disappeared, but that he has learned to meet them from a place of peace. In the past, he might have been swept away by the chaos of his duties, caught up in the endless stream of expectations. But now he knows that no matter how loud the world becomes, he has the ability to return to that inner space of silence, to tap into a source of clarity and calm that is always available to him. It's as if he's learned to navigate life's turbulence not by trying to control the storm, but by learning how to stay anchored in the midst of it. This is the power of silence. It teaches us how to remain grounded in the face of life's challenges. The more we connect with our inner stillness, the more we become less reactive and more responsive. We begin to realize that the true source of our suffering is not the external events we face, but our reaction to them. For the prince, this shift in perspective allows him to make wiser decisions. He speaks less, listens more, and when he does speak, his words carry weight. They are no longer empty or reactive, but thoughtful, deliberate, and infused with the peace he has cultivated within. His people notice the change. They sense a depth in his presence, a calmness in his leadership, and this, in turn, brings them peace as well. It's fascinating to consider how often we rely on words to solve problems or ease our discomfort. We think that by talking more, explaining more, or convincing others, we can create harmony. But in reality, words without wisdom can cause more harm than good. How many times have we spoken out of frustration, fear, or impatience, only to regret it later? How often have we tried to fix things with words when the real solution was silence? This is something that the prince learned on his journey, a lesson that all of us can apply. Silence isn't just an absence of sound. It is an active state of being, one that allows us to listen deeply, not only to the world around us, but to the inner wisdom that guides us. In this state, we can discern what is truly important and what is worth speaking. We can choose words that build up rather than tear down, words that heal rather than harm. But what does this look like in practical terms? How can we incorporate silence into our everyday lives? First, it's important to understand that silence doesn't necessarily mean withdrawing completely from the world. We don't need to take a 15-day vow of silence like the prince did to experience its benefits. What we can do, however, is carve out intentional moments of quiet in our day. It could be as simple as sitting in stillness for 5 minutes each morning before the rush of the day begins. It could mean taking a walk without the distractions of your phone, or having a conversation where you intentionally listen more than you speak. The goal is not to avoid communication, but to practice mindful communication. It's about learning to be present with ourselves and with others. When we are truly present, our words become more powerful. We stop speaking out of habit or impulse and start speaking with intention, with awareness, and with purpose. As you incorporate silence into your life, you may notice that your mind starts to quiet down as well. In those moments of stillness, you'll find space to reflect on your thoughts and emotions, to gain clarity on what really matters to you. The more you practice, the easier it becomes to differentiate between the chatter of the mind and the voice of your intuition, the voice that guides you toward your true purpose. For the prince, silence became a sacred practice. one that allowed him to reconnect with his deepest self. In this space, he was able to listen to the whispers of his heart, and as a result, his leadership became more authentic and aligned with his soul's purpose. He no longer felt the need to prove himself or chase after external validation. He understood that true power comes not from external accomplishments or recognition, but from aligning with one's inner truth. And this is the gift that silence offers to all of us. The opportunity to reconnect with our true selves, to hear our own inner voice, and to find peace amidst the chaos of life. Silence allows us to access the deep reservoir of wisdom within us, and in doing so, we can step into the fullness of who we are. But what happens when we embrace this power of silence? What does it mean for our lives, our relationships, and our sense of purpose? Let's pause and reflect for a moment. Imagine what could change in your life if you spent just 20 minutes a day in silence. What if, instead of rushing through your day, you made space for quiet reflection? How might your relationships change if you listened more deeply, spoke with more intention, and paused before reacting? The beauty of this practice is that it doesn't require any special training or equipment. It simply requires the willingness to slow down, to disconnect from the noise, and to listen deeply to yourself and the world around you. As the prince's story teaches us, silence is not a punishment or a burden, it's a gift. It's the space where we can heal, reflect, and reconnect with the essence of who we are. And in that space, we find not only peace, but clarity, purpose, and the power to choose our words wisely. As the prince begins to share the wisdom gained from his silence, the people in his kingdom notice something extraordinary. His presence feels different, calmer, more grounded, and deeply attentive. He listens in a way that makes each person feel seen and valued, and when he speaks, his words carry an unmistakable depth. It doesn't take long for others to grow curious about his transformation. They begin asking questions. What happened during those 15 days? How did silence change you so profoundly? At first, the prince hesitates to share, knowing that true understanding comes from experience rather than explanation. But he also realizes that his story could inspire others to embark on their own journey of self-discovery. One evening, he gathers his advisors, family, and a group of villagers for a quiet discussion. As they sit in the glow of a setting sun, he begins to recount his journey, not in great detail, but in a way that invites reflection. I went into silence seeking answers to the challenges of the kingdom, he says. I thought I would find strategies, solutions, and clarity on what to do next. But what I found was something entirely different. I discovered that my greatest struggle wasn't with the problems I faced in the outside world, but with the noise I carried within me. The people listen intently as he describes his early days of silence, the discomfort and restlessness that nearly drove him to give up. He tells them how he came face to face with his fears, his doubts, and the unrelenting chatter of his mind. But he also shares how, over time, the silence became a friend, how it created a space where he could observe his thoughts without being controlled by them. It was as if the silence acted as a mirror, he explains. It showed me parts of myself that I had ignored for years. It revealed the ways I had been using words, not just to communicate, but to avoid discomfort, to fill the gaps, and to mask my insecurities. And in seeing this, I learned something profound. The less I spoke, the more I understood, not just about myself, but about others. One of the villagers, an older woman with a kind but curious face, raises her hand. "But, Your Grace," she asks, "how can we practice silence in our busy lives? We have children to raise, fields to tend, and problems that demand our attention. How do we find the time?" The prince smiles gently. "It's not about retreating from your responsibilities," he says. "Silence isn't about abandoning the world. It's about engaging with it in a more mindful way. Even in the midst of activity, you can find moments of stillness. Wake a little earlier and sit in quiet reflection before the day begins. When you speak with others, pause before responding, and truly listen to what they're saying. These small moments of silence can make a great difference." The older woman nods thoughtfully, and others in the group begin to ask their own questions. The conversation flows naturally, and it becomes clear that the prince's story has struck a chord. People begin sharing their own struggles with noise and distraction. The constant demands of life, the feeling of being pulled in 1,000 directions, and the longing for peace amidst it all. The prince listens with genuine compassion, offering not solutions, but encouragement. Start small, he advises. Begin with just a few minutes each day. Don't worry about doing it perfectly. The practice of silence isn't about achieving anything. It's about creating space for yourself to simply be. Over time, you'll notice the difference. You'll feel more grounded, more present, and more connected to what truly matters. As the evening progresses, the group falls into a natural rhythm of sharing and reflection. There are moments of laughter, moments of quiet contemplation, and even moments of collective silence. Pauses where no one speaks, but everyone feels the shared presence of the group. It's in these pauses that something remarkable happens. The villagers begin to understand, on a deeper level, the power of silence. They see that it's not just an absence of noise, but a presence that allows them to connect more deeply with themselves and with each other. In the quiet moments, they feel a sense of unity, a shared humanity that goes beyond words. The prince, too, feels this connection. He realizes that his journey into silence was not just for his own benefit, but for the benefit of everyone around him. By learning to quiet his own mind, he has become a better leader, a better listener, and a better friend. And by sharing his story, he has planted seeds of transformation in the hearts of those who hear it. As the gathering comes to an end, the prince offers one final thought. Silence is a teacher, he says. It doesn't give you answers, but it helps you ask the right questions. It doesn't solve your problems, but it shows you how to face them with courage and clarity. And it doesn't take anything away from you. Instead, it gives you the gift of presence, the ability to fully embrace the moment you're in. The group disperses with a sense of calm and inspiration. Some of the villagers resolve to wake early the next morning for a moment of quiet reflection. Others plan to practice mindful listening in their conversations, and a few decide to try a longer period of silence, curious to see what they might discover. For the prince, the evening marks the beginning of a new chapter. He realizes that his role as a leader is not just to govern, but to guide, to help his people discover their own inner strength, their own capacity for peace. And he knows that the most powerful way to do this is not through commands or speeches, but by embodying the very qualities he wishes to inspire. The journey of silence, he understands, is not a destination, but a lifelong practice. It is a path that he will walk every day, in every moment, as he continues to lead with wisdom and compassion. As time passes, the prince's life becomes a living example of the power of silence and mindful speech. His leadership style evolves from one of command and control to one of quiet strength and presence. He no longer feels the need to prove himself to anyone. He listens deeply to his people, responds thoughtfully, and leads with a sense of calm that encourages those around him to do the same. One day, as he walks through the streets of his kingdom, he notices a remarkable change. The people who once rushed from task to task now move with a quieter sense of purpose. They greet each other with greater patience, speak less hurriedly, and seem more attuned to the present moment. It's as if the entire kingdom has absorbed the energy of silence, and in doing so, they've found a collective peace. The prince realizes that the impact of his journey wasn't just personal. It has rippled out, touching the lives of those around him. His decision to embrace silence and mindfulness has inspired a cultural shift, one where people are no longer slaves to the constant noise of the world. Instead, they are learning to reconnect with themselves, with each other, and with the deeper truths of life. But the prince also understands that this transformation isn't something that can be forced. It's a process, one that requires patience, commitment, and a willingness to let go of old patterns. Silence, like any meaningful practice, requires ongoing effort. It is something to be cultivated, nurtured, and returned to again and again, especially in a world that is constantly pulling us toward distraction. And so, the prince makes a commitment to continue his practice of silence, not just for his own benefit, but for the good of his people. He knows that as long as he remains anchored in this inner stillness, he will be able to lead with wisdom and compassion, no matter what challenges come his way. In his quiet moments of reflection, the prince often recalls the lessons of his journey. He remembers how, in the early days of silence, he was overwhelmed by the noise of his own mind. He remembers how he had to confront his fears, doubts, and insecurities, things he had long avoided by staying busy and speaking endlessly. But now, he understands that these very things were the keys to his transformation. They were the shadows that, when faced, revealed the light of his true self. It's in silence that we find our greatest wisdom. It's in stillness that we are able to hear our soul's deepest calling. And it's in this sacred space that we are able to discern what truly matters, what words are worth speaking, what actions are worth taking, and what kind of lives we want to lead. This is the gift of silence. It gives us the ability to align our words and actions with our truest self. It helps us to become more conscious of the energy we bring into the world and the impact we have on others. It reminds us that in a world that often values noise and speed, true power lies in the ability to be still, to listen deeply, and to speak with intention. As the prince reflects on his journey, he realizes that silence is not a one-time experience, but a lifelong practice. It's a practice that requires patience, humility, and a willingness to return to it again and again, especially in moments of stress, uncertainty, or overwhelm. In the final days of his journey, the prince looks out over his kingdom, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He sees his people living their lives with a newfound sense of peace, and he knows that this transformation has the potential to continue long after he's gone. Silence has become a gift, not just for him, but for all those who are open to receiving it. And this is the invitation for you, too, to embrace the power of silence in your own life, to give yourself the space to reflect, to listen, and to reconnect with the deepest parts of who you are. In silence, you will discover the strength to face your challenges, the clarity to make wise decisions, and the peace to navigate life with grace. Take a moment right now to reflect on what silence can bring into your life. What might change if you made space for quiet in your daily routine? What would happen if you listened more deeply to yourself and to those around you? Imagine what it could feel like to speak less, but to speak more meaningfully, to let go of the need to fill every moment with words, and instead embrace the stillness that allows you to hear your soul. And if you feel ready, I encourage you to start today. Carve out just 20 minutes of silence for yourself. It doesn't have to be perfect, but let it be intentional. Let it be a moment to pause, to breathe, and to reconnect with your deeper self. The transformation that comes from this practice is not always immediate, but over time, it will change the way you experience the world. You'll find that you speak more thoughtfully, listen more deeply, and live with a sense of peace that comes from within. As we wrap up this journey together, I want to invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced the power of silence in your life? How do you think it could help you on your personal journey of growth and transformation? Before we end, I also want to remind you to check out the previous video, Why Chosen Ones Are Leaving the Church and What They're Really Seeking. If you haven't seen it yet, it's a deep dive into the spiritual journey of those searching for something more, just like the prince in our story. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and share. And of course, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any future videos on topics like this, self-discovery, mindfulness, and finding your true purpose. I'm so glad you joined me on this journey today, and I look forward to sharing more with you in the future. Remember, in silence, we don't just hear the world more clearly, we hear ourselves, and that is where true transformation begins.